Welcome to Falmouth School Garden Tour. The school garden we're going to be looking at is the Maine School Garden area, our Farming Garden Learning Center, directly across the road from the school campus. It takes about 5 minutes for students to make the journey across the street. This is a little over a half-acre site, close to two-thirds of an acre, and we have several other gardens on campus, including a small orchard and some other raised beds. But this is sort of our meat and potatoes right here. Students typically enter through this archway that's made out of bittersweet, and this year we've been able to successfully grow some scarlet runner beans up it. In order to get students to really start tuning in and learning in this space, I want to start engaging senses as soon as possible. So we have this mint patch just to the right of the garden, a pretty indestructible set of plants, including this peppermint that I'm breaking off here, some oregano, and some lemon balm that students can enjoy throughout the garden. Part of this entranceway is that we have this willow wall that really needs some attention. It's gotten a little bit overgrown, but what I will do is I will come along and cut them this year at maybe about 7 feet height. Branches then are the cuttings to replant to another willow wall or to make an archway somewhere else, and then that'll spur on new vertical growth there. And this wall is intended to try and keep some of the larger animals out, like deer and people. And along our living wall, we actually have some grapes that have come in, which I'm excited about. Still not quite ready yet. We have a lot of flowers planted here. This starts in the springtime with some bulbs, followed in by some annual flowers, including some dahlias that are down here on the lower left, just starting to bloom for us because we got them in a little bit late. Some zinnias. There's actually a few cosmos tucked in here. One of my favorites, which we'll probably see in other parts of the garden, is this Mexican sunflower, Tithonia. And then back over here, there's some perennial hibiscus plants. And then really this kind of area has been sort of a bit of a, we're letting it kind of grow a little bit this year. We've tried planting a few things. There's actually a plum tree planted in there. Lots of oregano that have just because it got divided up. The oregano's fantastic for attracting pollinators and things like that, and kids can eat it. As we come into the garden, we can choose to go in through a path that's right through here next to these comfrey, and the comfrey are fantastic because they mine nutrients, making them readily available in the leaves, and then we actually cut it back. It's about due for a cutting right now, but I do cut them back 3 or 4 times in the summer. And I like to come here, although it's a little bit tough to see this time of year. This is one of our first guilds in the permaculture world. This is a cherry tree, and planted below the cherry tree there's rhubarb, which kids love. Of course, there's some comfrey back here. Both of these are really good at suppressing weeds. The peppermint has been kind of moving its way into the garden. There are strawberries planted in here, and there's another type of sweet mint or spearmint over here. And each one of these different things takes on a different role. I believe there's actually might be some walking onions tucked in there and other things. So this helps provide shade in the hot summer months for our little tree here, so we don't end up irrigating or having to water. In fact, this tree was not watered at all, even this year. Moving forward quickly along this comfrey path, there's some beans up here, some further beans, and then I actually have an Asian pear planted right up here with another guild below it. And interesting part about this guild is that there's some vetch here, some of this crown vetch, and I let it grow and then I chop it off and hope that the nitrogen returns to the soil. And behind it actually are some more willows, and we've allowed some of these trees to block some of the northerly winds that come whipping in from this direction. So we're trying to grow up a little bit of a wind barrier. Moving quickly past the bean wall on the left that has some loofahs in it and corn and winter squash to the right. Up to our top of our waterfall, our water features. This water gets pumped up from our lower pond, and I'll show you that soon. And this summer we work with students to kind of arrange. It's the beginning of a rainbow, but this was an art project that was done by the art teacher at the elementary school with first graders, where they took logs and painted these patterns and things like that. It's kind of a neat project. I helped her out just by getting her the logs, and she really worked to kind of help students develop and plan their logs out and what they were going to plant. And then I use, as this maintenance was coming along, they wanted to get rid of all of the logs, so I snagged them and I put them up first in what we call our fairy forest, and then later added them over to here. And then we had some cement paver work done with students, but they just added it in the last week of spring, and you can see those on this portion. So again, this water gets pumped up, and it just follows a series of little ponds. This is the only area where we've had to put in plastic liners here, and that's just because of the way that the soil works. So the waterfall is here because it's actually the high point of the garden where we pump it up to, but it's sort of my favorite view of the garden. So here we can see a few shots of it over the years and how much it's changed. So the water is pumped up, drops down these series of little ponds, and then snakes its way off over there, and we'll continue over there in a minute. But this area sort of gives you a view. Let's see if I can move a little bit more. We start to get a view of this portion of the garden. This area is like a big rectangle, and we call this Martha's Garden. We've had tomatoes here and potatoes. And we'll cross back over the stream in a second, but right here along the stream edge, I'm actually growing some celery, and we're going to walk back up this path, passing corn and beans. But the reason why I walked down here is I wanted to show this little trellis off that we're using here. These are really cheap cattle panels. There's nothing too sophisticated about them. They're maybe like $20-something a piece, and they should be about 4 feet wide by, say, maybe 16 feet long. You just hoop them over, and you just come up with some sort of a system for putting them in place, like a stake in the ground or just burying the edge, and then they become excellent ways of growing things. We've had peas on here. Last year we had beans, we had birdhouse gourds, and loofahs growing up here. This year we had peas in the spring. The beans didn't go in here, but the birdhouse gourds are growing in here. So this is nice. It's pretty easy, and it's a pretty easy way to trellis things up. We do have water here, which is a huge help. Looking back towards the birdhouse gourds, you can see also that there's a bunch of volunteer sunflowers that we let the birds and bees enjoy, and chipmunks, and they just kind of reseed themselves every year, and we enjoy them. Down here we have some husk cherries. These can be a treat for kids. Just remember, you've got to only eat them when they're orange. This is sort of a minimum orange, I'd say, to be tasty. If you eat them green, it'll make you throw up. The stream continues down, and here's another little frog habitat. All sorts of fun spots for kids. Following the stream through this culvert, we come to another little frog pond area. And this year, we don't have our aquaponics set up this year, so I actually took some of the rafts that we had, and then this spring just sort of tossed them in the water and threw in a few basil plants. So they're not doing fantastically well here. I mean, I think we've had cold water and things like that, and it's just not a great place for basil, but they're still here. It's growing. Continuing down the hand-dug stream behind the hoop house here, you can actually see our pizza oven off in the distance. And up on the right, there's a little garden bed reclaimed. And to the left here, it's Elderberry Island, which needs a little bit of attention, perhaps some filling in or even moving of the elderberry tree. But more importantly, as we circle back, we can look back at how the stream and what's happening at each one of these little waterfalls. And the idea being that we have these little waterfalls, and each time it goes down a little waterfall, it's maybe a total of a 6 to 8 foot drop, if that. 6 to 8 foot drop, and every time it goes down with these little waterfalls, a little bit of air gets added in. So there's a spot right near where I'm standing where the water can pump up, and then I can actually divert it. And there's a little bit of you can see a little bit of the green hose here. It goes over to my rice paddy, which is right over here, and we'll look at that in a second. But the water basically, for now, cuts around the backside of this little mound, and goes into our Maine pond area. And this is where we have turtles and frogs, and I've seen ducks and lots of all sorts of wildlife. And if you watch any of our videos on YouTube, you'll see some of the things we've seen. And we have a few intentional plants in there, from lilies and irises, and of course lots of duckweed and other things. And then this is an old hugel mound that needs to be removed or changed. It's just not working well for us. But in the hugel mound are is bee balm, which again is coming to an end at this time of year. And then we have a whole bunch of this walking onion, and this just started off as a handful of seeds. And as you probably know with walking onion, or maybe you don't, they grow up maybe 2 or 3 feet tall, bulbules, and then they fall over and plant themselves. And that's kind of what's happened here, is they've just planted themselves in all these different spots around here. This is our rice paddy, which has a few weeds in it right now that I need to deal with. But you know, it's really nice. It's an effective way of demonstrating how rice is sort of grown. But you can see the rice growing, and I'll give some more shots of the rice paddy. Here's a little teepee. Originally it was intended to be a bean teepee. The beans initially didn't do well. We've had chipmunks eating them, so I put in some gourds. They did okay, but they're now dying off. There's a little gourd for you right there. It's kind of neat. And now some of the beans have kind of seemed to be coming back. So we have these beautiful beans. I believe this is nor'easter. I've had multiple iterations of beans growing on this trellis. So, and I'll show you a picture of the teepee being built. And, you know, so you have an entryway here, and one could come in here. This is a plant called Mexican sunflower, or Tithonia. I love to grow it because really starting in about mid-August, it just puts out these beautiful flowers. Pollinators love them. I'm constantly seeing hummingbirds and monarch butterflies and all sorts of bees all over these plants. So I love to have them around, and they fill the garden space. They fill it with this green and these popping orange colors, and it's basically September. In Maine, it's September and then all the way through until we get a really good frost. So that's the way it is. We're still working on our tool organization, but you can see some there. Here we have a little bit of a squash patch, again with some volunteer sunflowers. This is an example. I've kept this example. This is a peach tree that seems to be having a little bit of troubles at the moment, and maybe it's just reaching its end of the year. But this peach tree, I unfortunately neglected to protect, and so it died off. And I knew it was going to die this spring because I looked down and it was girdled pretty badly by some sort of a rodent all the way around. So I kept it here. It even had little baby fruits and everything else and leafed out, and I kept it just to demonstrate to students, you know, to kind of like, let's take a look at this plant. We can see that it's dying off, so why? And then they talk about it and they think, well, maybe it's been poorly watered, and I could use this new peach tree to say this one has been watered and it's the same soil and everything else, so why is this new tree alive and this one dying? And so eventually we talk about the nutrients moving up from the roots, and then the sugars moving from the leaves after photosynthesis down to the roots, and how if you break off those elevators they can't move, and so eventually the plant just dies on its own. So this is an area that needs some TLC also. Anise hyssop here. We love, this is sort of a smell, taste your way through. There's supposed to be little steps. There's one there, one there. They're kind of hidden away, but we have garlic chives. We have some basil right now. We have anise hyssop over there. Calendula in the back, some sage, lilies, some edible marigolds, things like that. So it's supposed to be a smelling, tasting area. The rice paddy itself is, we dug down until we got to clay and then put back in some of the topsoil. And then that clay was actually used, this is a total mess area, I'm sorry, I finished cleaning up after camp, was used to make our pizza oven. And the pizza oven has worked fairly well. There'll be some pictures of it here. This has been rebuilt once by 8th graders. It was originally built by high school students, and we kind of rebuild it every once in a while because, as you can see, the clay starts to break off. So we need to rebuild it. And behind it you can see another example of my Tithonia, sort of hiding my sins back here. And now we're at one of our greenhouses. This is one of the new ones that we used CARES Act funds to pay for. We have 3 of these from Rimmel. They're 24 by 36. Right? Yeah, 24 by 36. And I have some shade cloth up because it does get super hot in here, and we have a little bit of a cooking area going on. Again, kind of a mess at the moment with picnic tables and things like that. We're still in recovery mode from camp because we've had to like switch over from doing summer camps to doing our school things. So this was an area where we had some grains. We had corn planted here. We had wheat in the middle, and then some oats down there at the end. You can see the oats still. The corn, we picked it all off. So it's a bit of a battle with our local chipmunks, but we managed to get enough to make it worthwhile. What we call the petal beds. This one here is a series of pollinator friendly plants, not necessarily native plants, but they're supposed to be native pollinator friendly. We do have some goldenrod and a few other weeds in there, but whatever, they're good for the pollinators, right? This becomes sort of a mystery bed, whatever we want to plant in it this year. Rachel brought in some house watermelon, cucumber, of course. There's actually random flowers thrown in. So again, this is not necessarily instructional, but each one of these little garden beds provides something. This is another mint flower bed, starting with chocolate mint up here, bee balm in the middle, and then with sweet mint down here. Another way to kind of for students to enter the gardens. And then finally, in the last bed, I actually have some horseradish that needs to come out. I just didn't have a place to put it when I first came here, so I stuck it in this bed, and we've now put in blackberries. And again, the idea being that just much like the front, that we're going to create this living wall. So we have these poles, and we're going to run wire across it and sort of create a fence of living wall. There's a lot going on in this garden. I'm sorry. This is one of our other little features. This is a great kiwi, hardy kiwi. It's our kiwi classroom, and this is the first year that this kiwi is actually at year 5, and it's actually finally started to fruit some. So, and what was really fun to show off on this plant is that you have a female plant, and a male plant, and the flowers are very distinct across the male plant versus the female plant, which of course you can show very distinct flowers in squashes and cucurbits, but this is cool because rather than just being on a single plant, it was all on one plant. So, and after we walk back through, again, our messy hoop house. This is our hoop house section. If I turn around quickly, so coming back out of the hoop house, blackberries, raspberries, and then another little mixed garden bed, which includes things like comfrey, some apples, some more walking onions, lovage. There's lots and lots of just randomly sown kale. Actually, this kale came about because what happened is I took some kale seed and I was winnowing it in front of our vent fan one year, and it just blew out by accident, and now we have it growing everywhere we want. All sorts of it. And then down here is another plant called crow's knees, which somebody gave me. And then this is an elderberry, and then tucked in way over here, which I was just robbed of, but maybe I'll have some pictures to show you, are some hazelnuts. And the idea here is that these hazelnuts will become a hedge or a row. And you can't see it so much now because of all this coltsfoot that's growing here, but there's actually a ton of strawberry plants growing all over the place here. So this provides lots and lots of fruit for kids to pick and eat all spring, and I've just, again, let them grow like crazy. Here's an example of the walking onion, Egyptian walking onion. Actually, this one had 2 seed heads growing on it, so it drops one, and as soon as these things touch the ground, they'll just immediately start sprouting roots, and so they take off. So we have an apple tree tucked in here. So really, there's a lot going on this garden, and it's hard to get it all in a quick tour, and I welcome you to come visit us at any time, and I'd be happy to show you around. But here we go.